She sat in the tiny cafe, staring at her phone, her fingers frozen above the screen. The email was short, almost too simple for what it meant. "We regret to inform you." Her heart pounded. She had seen those words too many times before. Each rejection chipped away at the confidence she had fought so hard to hold on to. But this one hurt differently. This wasn't just a job application or another failed business pitch. This was her last chance. The investors had listened, nodded along, even seemed impressed. And yet, here she was again, staring at another closed door. The world outside moved on as if nothing had changed. Cars rushed by, people chatted at nearby tables, laughter floated through the air. But for her, time had stopped. She had bet everything on this. Her savings were gone, her apartment lease was ending, and the weight of 1,000 doubts pressed down on her. Maybe they were right. The ones who had told her she was dreaming too big, that she wasn't cut out for this. The ones who smirked when she said she had a plan. The ones who walked away when things got tough. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. No, she wouldn't let this be the end she had lost before. She had fallen, failed, and been counted out more times than she could remember. But every time, she had found a way to stand back up. This time would be no different. Taking a deep breath, she shut off her phone and shoved it into her bag. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need permission to succeed. If no one was willing to take a chance on her, she would create her own path. She grabbed her notebook from her bag, flipping past the crossed-out ideas and abandoned plans. Then, with steady hands, she turned to a blank page and wrote 3 words: start from scratch. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. She stared out at the city skyline, the glow of the streetlights reflecting in her eyes. The same streets that once felt like an endless maze of obstacles now looked like a playground of possibilities. But getting here wasn't easy. Every scar, every lesson, every loss had shaped her into the woman she was becoming. People whispered behind her back, doubting she could ever rise again. She heard the laughter, the dismissive tones, the comments laced with fake sympathy. It used to sting, but now it fueled her. She wasn't interested in proving them wrong, she was only interested in proving herself right. But the past wasn't so easily left behind. Every success she achieved seemed to bring out ghosts she thought she had buried. Old faces resurfaced, some with apologies, others with hidden agendas. The ones who underestimated her were suddenly acting as if they had always believed in her. She knew better. Still, she played along, watching, learning, strategizing. This wasn't just about financial success. This was about building something that could never be taken away from her again. Trust was a currency she spent cautiously, investing only in those who had proven their loyalty through action, not just words. The stakes were getting higher, and with each milestone she reached, the risks grew. There were people who wanted her to fail, not just because of jealousy, but because her rise threatened their own power. She had disrupted the status quo, and that made her dangerous. A message arrived late at night, just a few words that sent a chill down her spine. "You haven't changed as much as you think." She read it twice, then deleted it. If someone from her past was trying to get in her head, they'd have to try harder. She wasn't that scared, uncertain girl anymore. She had built her own empire from the ground up, and she wasn't about to let anyone shake it. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. She barely slept that night. The message echoed in her mind, not because she was afraid, but because it was a reminder. No matter how far she had come, the past had a way of creeping back in. By morning, she was back in her office, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city she had conquered. The world saw her as a powerhouse, a woman who had turned nothing into everything. But only she knew the cost. Her assistant knocked softly before stepping in. "There's someone asking to see you," they said hesitantly. "They won't give their name." A warning bell went off in her mind. Send them away. They said you'd want to hear what they have to say. She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. The door opened, and the moment she saw the person standing there, she knew this wasn't a social call. The past had finally caught up with her. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. She kept her expression unreadable, though inside, her mind raced. She hadn't seen this person in years, and yet, here they were, standing in her office, as if they had never left her life. "I didn't think you'd actually see me," they said, their voice calm but cautious. She leaned back in her chair, studying them carefully. "I don't have time for small talk. Why are you here?" They hesitated, glancing toward the window, before finally meeting her gaze. "You're in danger." A slow exhale left her lips, though she showed no sign of surprise. "I've been in danger since the day I started building this empire." "This is different," they insisted, stepping closer. "There are people watching you, and if you don't act fast, they're going to take everything from you." She held back a smirk. The world had tried to take everything from her before, and each time she had risen stronger. But something in their tone made her pause. This wasn't a vague warning. It was specific, calculated. She folded her hands on the desk. "Who sent you?" Their jaw tightened. "Someone who knows the truth about what really happened all those years ago." A chill ran down her spine, though she didn't let it show. She had buried the past too deep for anyone to dig up. Or so she had thought. "You're going to have to be more specific than that," she said smoothly. They hesitated again before sliding a folded piece of paper onto her desk. "Read this, and be careful who you trust." She watched as they turned and walked out, leaving behind only a name scrawled across the paper. A name she hadn't seen in years. A name she thought was gone for good. The walls of her office suddenly felt smaller. The empire she had built, the power she had fought for, none of it would matter if the truth came out. She had to find out who was behind this, and she had to do it fast. "Want me to keep going?" She unfolded the paper slowly, her fingers steady, despite the unease settling in her chest. The name written across it sent a ripple of memories crashing over her memories she had locked away, buried under years of ambition and calculated success. She traced the letters with her eyes, as if saying the name in her mind would summon the past right into her present. For a long moment, she just sat there, the noise of the city outside, muffled by the weight of this revelation. If this person was back, it meant trouble, not just for her, but for everything she had built. Every decision she had made, every risk she had taken had all been to escape that part of her life. And now, someone was trying to drag her back into it. She took a breath, picked up her phone, and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. The voice on the other end answered immediately. "I need information," she said, keeping her tone clipped and professional. "And I need it fast." The person on the line hesitated. "This isn't a good time." "It never is," she replied. "But you owe me. And right now, I'm calling in that favor." There was a pause before they sighed. "What do you need?" She read the name on the paper aloud. The silence that followed was heavier than she expected. "You still there?" She pressed. "Where did you get that name?" The voice was lower now, more cautious. "Someone came to see me. Said I was in danger. Left me this." Another pause. "Then, you need to get out of town." "Now?" She almost laughed. "That's not happening. I'm serious. If they're back, it means someone opened a door that should have stayed closed." She leaned forward, gripping the edge of her desk. "Then tell me who opened it," the voice on the other end exhaled sharply. "Meet me in an hour. Usual place. And come alone." The line went dead. She stared at her phone for a second before locking the screen. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. And she wasn't about to run from it. She grabbed her coat and walked out of her office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As she stepped into the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. The woman looking back at her wasn't afraid. She was ready, because if the past had come knocking, it had no idea what it was about to face. Want me to keep going the drive to the meeting? Spot was tense. She kept her eyes on the road, but her mind was racing. The name on the paper still burned in her thoughts. It wasn't just about the past resurfacing, it was about who had the power to bring it back. Someone had set this in motion, and she needed to know why. She pulled into the dimly lit parking lot and scanned her surroundings. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the city's neon glow reflecting off puddles on the pavement. She spotted the figure standing by the alleyway, hands tucked into a coat pocket. Watching her approach, she stepped out of her car, keeping her posture firm. "Talk," she said without preamble. The person sighed. "It's worse than you think, then make me understand." They hesitated, before glancing over their shoulder. "Your name was never supposed to resurface in this. Someone's been digging deep. And they found something you thought was buried for good." Her stomach tightened. Who? They looked at her, their expression grim. Someone close. That hit harder than she expected. She had always been careful about who she trusted. The idea that someone in her inner circle had betrayed her was almost unthinkable. Almost. "Who is it?" she demanded. "I don't have a name yet. But I do know this: they didn't just stumble onto this by accident. Someone gave them the trail to follow. That was the real problem. Someone was feeding information, pulling strings in the background. And if they had gone this far, it meant they weren't done yet." She clenched her fists. "Then we cut them off before they get any further." The person hesitated. "Are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you do, there's no turning back." She met their gaze without flinching. "I never turn back." A shadow moved in the distance, barely visible under the flickering streetlights. She didn't wait to find out if it was just a trick of the light. "We need to move," she said. They nodded, slipping a folded note into her palm. "Read this when you're alone. And be careful who you trust." She took the note and got back into her car, her pulse steady, but her mind anything but. As she drove away, she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about her past anymore. It was about her future. And someone was trying to control it. They had no idea what they had just started. She gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove through the nearly empty streets. The note sat on the passenger seat, still unopened. Her instincts screamed at her to read it, but she knew better than to make a rushed move. Whoever had left it behind wanted her to take her time, to think things through before reacting. She pulled into an old parking garage, one she hadn't used in years. The flickering lights cast long shadows against the concrete walls. She parked in the farthest corner, where the cameras had likely stopped working long ago. With one deep breath, she unfolded the note. "You're being watched. Every move. Every step. The moment you think you're ahead, they will already be waiting. Don't trust what you see, look beyond it." Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just about someone from her past resurfacing. This was bigger. Someone had been orchestrating this from the start, moving people like chess pieces, making sure she followed the path they wanted. She exhaled sharply and reached for her phone. Before she could dial, the screen lit up with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Who is this?" A low, controlled voice came through. "You should have stayed buried in the life you built. But since you insist on chasing ghosts, let's make this interesting." Her jaw clenched. "What do you want?" A pause. "Then to remind you who's really in control." Before she could reply, the line went dead. A moment later, her phone buzzed again, this time. A video message. She tapped it open. The screen flickered, showing grainy footage of her office, her home, places she thought were secure. Someone had been watching her for a long time. The last frame was the worst, an image of someone she trusted, standing in the shadows, shaking hands with a man she didn't recognize. Her chest tightened. It was the proof she had been dreading. The betrayal wasn't distant, it was right in front of her. She clenched the note in her fist. They thought this would break her, make her stop. But they had underestimated her. She started the car and peeled out of the garage. There was only one thing left to do: confront them. 20 minutes later, she stood outside a familiar door, the one place she thought was safe. She knocked once, twice. Then the door opened. The person on the other side looked at her, eyes filled with something unreadable. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." She stepped inside, her heart pounding. "You should have told me." Slow, almost regretful smile crossed their face. "And ruin the fun?" She exhaled, steadying herself. "You're going to tell me everything." Now, for the first time, they looked uncertain. "Are you sure you want to hear it?" She didn't blink. "I don't have a choice." What came next changed everything. She stood in the doorway, waiting for an answer. The weight of everything she had uncovered pressed down on her, but she refused to let it show. The person in front of her, someone she had trusted for so long, finally sighed and stepped aside, allowing her in. The air inside was thick with unspoken words. She could see it in their eyes, the hesitation, the battle between guilt and something else, something colder. She moved to the center of the room, crossing her arms. "Start talking." They hesitated for just a moment, then finally spoke. "You were never supposed to find out." She felt a sting at those words, but she had expected them. "But I did." A slow nod. "And now you're here. So, what happens next?" She exhaled. "That depends on you. Are you going to tell me the truth, or are you going to keep playing games?" For the first time, their confidence wavered. "It was never a game." "Not for me." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why? Why did you do it?" They ran a hand through their hair, looking away. "Because I had to. Because if I didn't, they would have taken everything from me. And from you." Her stomach tightened. She had suspected manipulation, but she hadn't realized how deep it ran. "Who are they?" Their voice dropped lower. "The same people who've been watching you, controlling the pieces. They don't just want to stop you. They want to own you." She clenched her jaw, fists tightening. "That's never going to happen." A small, bitter smile. "That's what I told myself too. And look where I am now." She took a step closer. "You still have a choice." Their eyes met hers, searching, weighing something unspoken. Finally, they exhaled. "If I tell you everything, you won't be able to walk away." She gave a humorless laugh. "I think we're past that point." Silence stretched between them. Then slowly, they nodded. "All right. But once I start, there's no going back." She didn't flinch. "Tell me everything." And so they did. The story unfolded in pieces, each revelation heavier than the last. They had been involved from the very beginning, but not by choice. The threats had started subtly, a warning here, a missing file there. Then, when that wasn't enough, the pressure had increased. Deals were made in the shadows, alliances forged under duress. The people pulling the strings were more powerful than she had realized, their influence reaching far beyond what she had imagined. But the worst part wasn't just the deception. It was the realization that she had been a part of their plan all along. Every move she had made, every victory she thought was her own, it had all been orchestrated. Not to stop her, but to push her exactly where they wanted her to be. And cold. "Why me?" They hesitated. "Because you're the only one who could change everything." And they knew it. The weight of those words settled on her shoulders, but instead of fear, she felt something else. Determination. She squared her shoulders. Then they made a mistake. "Because I'm not playing by their rules anymore." Their expression shifted, something flickering in their eyes. "Hope, maybe. You really think you can fight them?" She nodded. "I don't think." "I know." For the first time in a long time, she saw them hesitate. Then slowly, they nodded. "Then, I'm with you." It wasn't going to be easy. The people they were up against had spent years building their empire, ensuring no one could challenge them. But they hadn't counted on her refusing to back down. Piece by piece, she started to unravel their control. She exposed the hidden deals, the corruption buried beneath polished facades. With every truth she brought to light, their grip weakened. They tried to fight back, but she had spent too long being underestimated. In the end, it wasn't a single moment that brought them down. It was the accumulation of everything. The people who had once feared them turned against them. The lies they had built their power on crumbled beneath the weight of the truth. And when it was over, when the dust settled and the last of them fell, she stood at the center of it all, unbroken. She had won. But victory didn't feel the way she had expected. There was no celebration, no grand moment of triumph. Just quiet realization. She had spent so long fighting that she had almost forgotten what came after. She turned to the one person who had stood by her in the end. What now? A small, knowing smile. Whatever you want. She looked out at the world in front of her, a world that was finally hers to shape. She had fought for this, bled for it. And now she was free. Not just to survive, but to live.